The most at-risk industries like financial, tech, and government agencies use web isolation to keep their networks and users secure. The Silo Web Isolation platform by Authenticate allows users to experience the web in full isolation, eliminating the chance of a web-borne cyber attack. You can interact with malicious files and websites without worry, even if you're working remotely. Authenticate enables anyone, anywhere, on any device to experience the web without risk. See how it works at securityweekly.com/authenticate. Deepwatch provides innovative managed security services that empower organizations to be more resilient against today's evolving cyber threats. Deepwatch offers game-changing capabilities in managed detection and response, managed endpoint detection and response, and vulnerability management, all delivered through a unique squad model, a dedicated group of security experts that works directly with each client. From managed security operations to threat hunting to continuous measurement of security readiness, Deepwatch is advancing the service of managed security. Measure your SecOps maturity for free by visiting securityweekly.com/Deepwatch. Most breaches are caused by exploiting oversights in basic cybersecurity fundamentals, but complex hybrid multi-cloud infrastructures make cybersecurity hygiene challenging. Red Seal can help. It shows you what's on your network, how it's connected, and the associated risk across public cloud, private cloud, and physical environments. With Red Seal, you'll get control of your cybersecurity fundamentals so you can protect your organization from the inevitable attack vectors and reduce your cyber risk. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/Red Seal. Welcome back, everyone, to Business Security Weekly. Would you like to have all of your favorite Security Weekly content at your fingertips and hear from Sam and Andrea when we have upcoming webcasts and technical trainings? Have a question about from or for one of our illustrious hosts, or someone from the Security Weekly team, or just wish you could hang out with the Security Weekly community? Subscribe to your favorite podcast catcher, sign up for our mailing list, and join our Discord server all in one place, securityweekly.com/subscribe. And speaking of upcoming webcasts and technical trainings, you'll learn how to build a risk-based vulnerability management program, how to prevent phishing scams, and how to move beyond vulnerability scan to vulnerability fix by visiting securityweekly.com/webcast. Lots of great stuff coming up. Of course, if you happen to miss one, you can go to /on-demand and see and register for ones in the archive. Jason, I'm very excited that we're taking over news from Matt, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've inundated the news page.
We have. I wanted to start with your article number 2, the creative mindset, because I then wanted to transition into my story number 7.
Sure. So let me start off with what led me to the creative mindset article was the one before that. That was if pandemic productivity is up, why is innovation slowing down? So this was an interesting study that kind of led me down the rabbit hole of all these other innovation type articles. And basically what we're finding through the study is that productivity is stable through the pandemic. People are working hard, but what's taking a hit is the ability for organizations to innovate effectively. They identified a couple of reasons why. One of it is, during times like this, businesses tend to spend a little bit less money, because uncertain times they want to save bank. But through the research, they're saying innovation's being stifled because of the difficulty to collaborate.
I completely agree. I was thinking as you were describing that, Jason, I'm like, it's because people aren't in the same room together.
That's what it is, right? So they're finding that just Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and things of that nature, people aren't really getting the full effect of that innovative environment, right?
Yeah, because innovation comes from us basically sitting around shooting the shit.
Brainstorming, having a whiteboard.
Yes.
It's one of those crazy things that my team always says to me, don't give him a whiteboard marker because he'll spend the next hour with you, and it's the truth. I forgot how important just having a meeting room with a whiteboard is.
Yes, I completely agree. I think having that casual environment when you're all in the same room, just chatting, it breeds innovation. We see that when we go to conferences and we sit with our security friends and we're just chatting, and every single time I've been to a conference, I come back on the airplane and I'm jotting notes down.
Yeah.
And it's based on those conversations I had 100%. Talking with people that sparked some type of innovation or idea in my head.
100%. And during those scenarios, if we're collaborating somewhere, whether it's at a conference or a meeting. So many times I'll pick up my phone and just email myself some notes.
Yes.
Right. Just quickly so I can jot it down and get it down. So this article made me really sit back and say, what can we be doing differently in this environment? And that's where this, the creative mindset article came out, because I started looking at different ways that in this environment that we're in, can we get some level of that effectiveness for innovation back? Right. And some of it, I really liked the creative mindset. It was a video conference podcast type scenario where they had guests, almost like a webinar. And it was by this gentleman named Jeff DeGraff. And he was one of the original Domino's Pizza executives, really heavy on the innovation side. It was prior to them, selling the business off. He created out of the University of Michigan the first, Innovatrium, they called it, which was like the innovations hub and how they can actually push innovation out to the business, and teaching MBA courses on innovation. It was really, really cool. The webinar itself, but there are so many pieces, so many little nuggets that I took out of it. So folks, if you can watch it, watch it. One of it is knowing yourself. Know when and where you're the most creative. One of the things that he brought up was, listen, he as an innovator, he innovates the best and gets his best mind share in chaotic situations, fast-paced situations, running 1,000 miles an hour. That's when innovation and brainstorms come, where other people may have to meditate and go for a walk.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Because I think catastrophic issues and chaos can breed innovation. Some people do think that way. Other people, like myself, I'm more in the bathroom or in the shower when I have some of my most creative moments, and like wish I had like a whiteboard or some way to write stuff down in the shower, right? It is different for every person, and some people benefit, I think, by structured conversations, some maybe more open conversations. But I think the rut you get stuck in the pandemic is everyone's working from home, and we have meetings, and they're very strategic or tactical and like on point, and they're part of the mission. But we still need those meetings where we can pull back, because we didn't get to all go to lunch together, but we still need that time where we can kind of all pull back and maybe have a broad topic and just kind of, throw stuff around and see what sticks.
That's it. And you just hit on another point that they said: be prepared to capture ideas once they start flowing. If you can get your team into that kind of mindset virtually to really get that brainstorming going, make sure you have those tools. Make sure at 1 a.m. when you pop up and you wake up with that epiphany, you have a tool to jot it down, because that's a lot of times it's going to come when you least expect it. But you want to be able to write that down. And another good one is pay attention to who actually gives you energy, and pay attention to who sucks energy away from you.
Oh, it's important.
That was another great one.
Yeah. Sometimes you need to be social about it. Sometimes you need time to think about things somewhat disconnected. And that's, my story number 7, I thought was spot on, because I use music all the time to increase my productivity. I think I always have. And many of us do, but there's some nuances in there. And while we could do an entire show on audio gear, but we'll leave that aside. I like to find the right kind of music for the right kind of work, right? When you're focused and really coding and you got a mission, I like to use no words, just EDM music. Sure. There may be other times where you're doing a presentation, maybe you want to be a little more creative. I might use a different style of music that does have words, but you got to be careful, because it can be distracting. And sometimes I'll notice it right away. I'll put the wrong music. I'm like, oh, that sounds really good. And then I just get in this mode, and I'm like, wait, I'm not working. I'm just listening to my music. It sounds so good, and I'm just captured in the moment. And you have to choose the right music. And maybe that's good. Maybe you do need to take a break from the day and just, I'm gonna listen to a few songs and just clear my head before I go in and then start writing my slides. So I think
that's
you can
the first
use
thing I thought of, Paul. The first thing I thought of is you're using that as that meditative type tool, right? Give you a little bit of a break.
Right.
So that way you can kind of refresh and rebuild the thought leadership piece of it, Right. So it's, a lot of folks need, and that article that you put out there aligns with that 5 strategies one that I put out there, right? You need to stimulate your imagination, whatever that may be. For me, music is not only listening to it, but my family loves to play music, right? So last night, my son and I I picked up my guitar, he picked up his drum, and we started playing together, right? And it's that type of stuff where all of a sudden my creative juices started flowing, and I had to go email myself a couple of ideas for today.
Right.
Right. So it's a scenario where pick something up that is going to help stimulate your imagination, help stimulate your mind, maybe pull you away from work for a little while, but your gears are still spinning. One of the things was maybe learn a new language.
Sure. Yeah. So it's interesting. That ties into my story, I believe, number 6, how to actually reach your goals. And I thought it was a pretty good article. And what I liked there was lots of really funny, I thought the graphs were really funny. I don't know if you looked at some of these graphs that were in there. But I thought they were really funny in talking about like time-based goals versus goal-based goals as 2 different things. So you talk about learning a new language. Time-based is I'm going to spend 1 hour every other day learning Japanese. Yeah. That's cool. Goal-based is I want to get to doing 100 push-ups every other day. Yep. And that's goal-based. And it's good to know the differences and I think plan accordingly. But then they've got this whole like mapping it out, like how much time you're spending learning Japanese, how much time you spent going to the toilet and getting a cup of water, turning on the computer, your cat's distracting you. And they had it. I would just allow for more time. Going to much to my wife's chagrin, which all wives think their husbands spend way too much time in the toilet. I think that's a pretty common theme that we can hit on, and they hate that. But you may be being productive and creative in there. I'm often actually reading articles, right, when I'm in there.
There's a dose of reality to that's where we're our most productive sometimes. There's a dose of reality there, I'm telling you.
Yep. So I thought it was a good article to kind of, the thing I struggled with when I first started creating businesses, and especially in projects at work, was differentiating between your objectives and your goals, and then your time-based goals versus your actual goals, and then what steps are needed to get there. And doing that, what we talked about, Jocko, I think on the break, prioritize and execute. I say that more and more. I say that at home. I said that at work this morning to the production team. I'm like, prioritize and execute. China's like, this is my goal for this week. I'm like, go do it, and I'll run interference for anything that that comes across your plate.
And let me tell you, it's a science to get your time-based goals to align to your outcome-based goals, so that way you're achieving your outcome. Right? Yes. You're playing the long ball. Yep. So for me, it's how am I taking some of those day-to-day activities that I'll consider them tactical, time-based type goals. How do I get them to align to the bigger picture, the bigger strategy, the bigger outcome that I want to achieve for my department and my company?
Yep. And I thought it ties in actually my story number 5, how unintentional new morning routine has changed my day. And we've talked a lot about people that work well at night, people that work well in the morning. Maybe you're not a morning person. For me, it kind of shifts around based on the chaotic schedule that is my day job and my family life. I mean, there's a lot of chaos that ensues in both of those realms. And me having a regular schedule is super hard. So I've just tuned myself to be like, some days it's getting up early and working. Some days it's at night. And that's another reason why I use music I need to be in the mode for this at this time. I have to sometimes force myself because, a lot of things happen. There's a global pandemic. Maybe the kids are home this week. Maybe they're not. I mean, that throws a whole other monkey wrench into it. And that's what they're talking about in this article, how, a time shift, working from home kind of help them do some things more early. Maybe you're not a morning person, as this person describes. Totally respect that. But she was like, what I pulled from the article that I thought was great, rushing around in the morning causes stress and anxiety. If you're someone who sets everything out at night before, then the extra time in the morning is key to start your day on the right foot. You'll become more intentional about the task and have time to breathe. I found that too. The more organized you are, I think in the morning, the better. Nighttime, you've got 100%, leeway, 100%. Right? But I find this if I'm rushing to get here for a meeting in the morning, it sets you up for a stress and anxiety throughout the whole day.
Well, 100%. I mean, it's one of those scenarios, and my wife says it all the time. Make sure we start our day off on the right foot.
Yep.
Right. So let's not argue in the morning. Let's not yell in the morning. Let's not get frustrated at each other because
which is hard if your spouse is not a morning person and you are, which is my situation. Like you got to have a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy for your coworkers and for your home, because we're talking about both in this context, and just understanding how people work.
Yeah, and having kids at home learning remote, right? there, and that's kind of the precipice of why the conversation happens every once in a while. Is
you hide all of the sharp objects in the home before they start the homeschooling.
That's right. These kids need to learn today. Don't stress them out before they have to go remote learn.
Yeah, it's funny. My wife says that too. And we try and do the same thing with people in the workplace too, right? Yeah. Someone's got a full plate. Don't stress. You got to be in tune with what is on other people's plates. And that's, I think, a huge lesson.
Know the personalities, but I couldn't agree more. I mean, simple things like just making sure that you don't have to get up in the morning and get your clothes ready and iron and do all that kind of stuff. If you can get up and pull as much stress out of the beginning of your day as you possibly can, you're gonna sail a little bit smoother into that workday.
I also think it's interesting. It segues a little into my story number 3, in that people are working from home, and this article attempted to kind of capture the security challenges. And I'm like, well, first, these are all security challenges we've always had, whether we've got one person working from home and other people traveling, or 100% of our people are working from home. These are all challenges. And there wasn't great, I don't think this was the article's intention, but there's not great advice about, okay, avoid mixing work and leisure activities. But you have to design your cybersecurity program to handle folks accessing your stuff from anywhere. I mean, that's
100%.
That's table stakes 100%. Today.
Absolutely. And to think that we're going to be able to separate those two these days is we're walking around with blinders, because that's never going to happen.
And I know it's a buzzword, but I want folks to think about in research, because I got a glimpse into SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. And it's more than just points of presence in the cloud that you can connect to. It's about, and I've noticed this with data security and other solutions, that they're tying into the login, so that if I'm logging into a SaaS service, there are integrations with that login activity that are able to create secure tunnels, validate my machine, handle my data effectively, not let me log in if it's a certain situation. Those are the technologies we need to be evaluating, because we're not going to stop people from logging in from every different device that they have, and they have a lot.
Well, 100%. And again, we have expectations on our staff, on our users, especially in this time, to make sure they're being productive, right? And we talked about it earlier. Now, to be able to say, to your end user base, you really, we're going to constrict you down to be able to do nothing but 100%, work, spinning your gears all day, every day. We can't do that, right? We have to have a balance, because our workforce is under a level of stress right now that we need to make sure that we're striking a balance. And now, that's not to the detriment of security. It's finding the right balance, right?
Yes.
To make sure that you're taking care of your workforce, and at the same time making sure that they're doing it in a secure fashion.
The technology today allows you to make decisions about what level of access people should have based on who they are and what device they have. And
absolutely.
That, right. Lots of technologies on 100%. Enterprise Security Week is a show we dig into, all the nitty gritty details on that. But that's what I thought was applicable to this article, and where your CISO should be, your mindset should be about what's next if you're not implementing some of those technologies today.
100% agreed.
Let's see. This was interesting, related to our previous segment, and that's the role of access and information security. My story number 2 is a deep dive into IAM. And I thought it was a pretty good roadmap, Jason. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, no, I did. I enjoyed the article. It's one of those scenarios where it's got to be top of mind for us, right? I mean, Matt says it all the time. It's identity, right? It's the data, it's the application, it's where we're at. I mean, we have to be thinking in terms of role-based access continuously.
Yes. And I think that this is one of the more difficult things to do. We touched on the previous segment, was granting permission to subjects with a business need to access various objects, and denying those that don't. Sure. But that's hard. That's
and that's what one of the things I wanted to say is this is one of those items that say easy, do hard, because you really, really need to dig into the business in order to get this right. You need to dig into business processes to know that you're giving right people the right information at the right time to do their jobs, and denying access to the information to the people who don't have that that role to be looking at the information, having access to the information, downloading the data, right? So it's due hard. You really, really have to dig in. It's almost that next layer to identify all your assets, identify all your data repositories, right? Now it's identify who actually needs access to it when.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And how.
It's funny, you said the title of my article number 4, right? Do the hard things first is Capital One's advice. I thought more interesting, the snippet from this article that I liked was, as you go through your journey, you're going to find a lot of paths that don't get you where you want to go. And you're going to learn from them, and that's okay. You're never going to get it right the first time. And I think at the pace that we're moving with digital transformation, for lack of a better term, I think that's absolutely the case. The difference is you don't have to put as much investment in to realize that it's the wrong path. And that's the key. That's what was somewhat missing from this quote, was expend only the amount of effort you need to realize if something's going to work or not. And if it doesn't, then you can back out. Don't get all the way through the path and work really hard only to find out it's not going to work. Fail harder first earlier on in the process.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those scenarios where it's kind of that coming, circling all the way back to innovation. One of the mantras of innovation is fail often, but make sure that you can pull out of it quickly enough to know you're not going down the rabbit hole, right? So you want to be failing, because failing, you're learning, you're innovating, but don't do it at the detriment of the organization, the company, the business unit, right? You just do it in a smart fashion, because we're going to fail. There's no doubt about it. That's how. And not doing anything's
not the answer either.
Just do it in a safe environment.
Yeah, Ed Scotus instilled in me this wisdom when he was talking about building some of his courseware, and Ed, being Ed, and he was awesome in so many ways, said, I mapped it down to I had to create so many slides per day. I'm talking about a goal and time-based. He had the goal and time-based thing nailed for his class. I know I need X number of slides a day. I know what my goals are. I know time-based. It's this amount of time per slide. And my question for him, Ed, what do you do when you get stuck? Because we've all been there developing a presentation or training class. What do you do when you get stuck? And he said, this great question. He goes, sometimes if I'm stuck, he's like, I just start putting ideas down on the slides. And he's like, I may create a bunch of slides and start putting out a bunch of ideas on them. He's like, I don't want to get to a point where I'm overthinking it. I just start putting ideas down. But that's a low cost way, right? Don't do 2 hours worth of research and then start just putting stuff down on slides, but have the ideas, start putting those down on slides. That's low cost. And helps you get to your goal. And if you got to delete one of those slides, fine. Don't spend 2 hours on one slide as a test. Spend 5 minutes on each slide, put together 5, and then you may decide to remove one, right? And I think this is what Capital One is the quote's kind of speaking to.
And Paul, it's funny because it goes back to that article that we talked about first, that creative mindset. One of the ways to spark innovation is once you define a problem that you have, right? And once you define kind of a challenge that you want to overcome, one of the techniques is association. And association is connect the ideas that you're having with analogies. So one of the examples was there was a challenge that the gentleman was trying to solve for universities during COVID. And it had to do with them having a challenge with being able to operate over the next year because kids can't come into school, right? So what he ended up doing was they put down their first challenge statement, and it was, due to COVID-19, small colleges will and must develop a plan to operate virtually over the next year. And then they thought about it. They're like, wait a minute, that's not really the problem. The problem is, due to COVID-19, small colleges will lose 15% of its current enrolled students, and this is how much of an effect on the budget it's going to have, right?
Right.
That's the real problem. The outcome is that they want the college to survive. Well, they started brainstorming, and they ended up coming up with all these different brainstorm ideas, just random associations, and they used the solar system. And the way they did it was they looked at something called binary stars. One of the stakeholders said, hey, I took this course when I was in college, and we talked about binary stars, right? And at the end of the day, the binary stars are planets that actually trade these stars. And they were like, we could use that to rotate professors around our 10 universities and have peer-to-peer teaching.
Nice.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you start doing that level of just start jotting things down, and maybe you can build this association later. And it's funny how you mentioned that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like using analogies like that, and especially applying them. Jason, you still there? Your video froze.
Oh, I'm here. Can you hear me?
There he is. I mean, nervous. So my story number 8. I've been doing a lot of this process automation. It's interesting. So I started diagramming out some of our equipment, and then someone on my team was like, "You should also diagram some of the processes." And I'm like,
"Yeah,
this won't take me as long as you think." Because lo and behold, we actually have some documentation that I can use to diagram some of this stuff out. And tackling the process automation, I love this article because it's about finding your bottlenecks. And so when you lay out your processes, you often uncover bottlenecks very, very quickly. Fix those first before you start implementing your automation and building on that. And I'm like, oh, this is exactly 100%. What I'm going through right now, is improving these so we can be more efficient, and identifying, well, that takes them, you basically throw it all on the paper, and they're like, wait, that takes the most time. Okay, that's where I want to apply my automation.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It reminds me of going through quite a few years ago. One of my things was, if I, as a technology professional, if I can't figure out the business's processes to automate, I'm going to be a failure as a technology leader. So let me get educated on process improvement. Let me get educated on business process mapping. So I went through some lean certification, right? So bringing the idea of lean into IT was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. Actually signing up for that course, because our organization was actually teaching it at the time. They brought in a third party trainer, and I signed up for the course. And now thinking back, part of lean process management, the BPM side of the aisle, is go up, grab a piece of paper and start documenting, or a whiteboard, and start documenting the process, soup to nuts. And all of the stakeholders are playing those processes, and then identify if they're value add or non-value add. Right?
Yep.
And then once you start taking a deep dive into non-value added processes at the end, your job is to eliminate those as much as you possibly can. Anything that does not add value, eliminate, automate, orchestrate, whatever you can do to make sure that non-value add leaves the business process.
And you can apply this to really cybersecurity. You can apply it to IT. You can apply it to anything. The most difficult thing for me, and here's how I dealt with it, was when you do a workflow diagram. I started reading up on how you do a workflow diagram, and I'm familiar with the lean stuff because I read all the books, the Unicorn Project and all those, the Phoenix Project, and the audio books that it comes. So that gave me a good background. But then I was reading about how you create a workflow diagram, and I struggled with the most fundamental thing. You got to pick a starting point and an end point, and your brain gets overwhelmed, and you're like, I don't know what process do I start with, and what's the end to that? But that process requires all these other things. And I was like, you know what? I just picked a point in the middle. I'm like, I know this process starts here, and we need a lot of other stuff before that, but like, I can't think about that stuff right now. Let's just say I have all that stuff. And then I picked an end point, and then I fleshed out everything in between. And then I looked at it and go, okay, I need a process that gets me that information, right, to start this. Let me go diagram that. And then I started again, pick a start and an end. It's been going pretty well. It hasn't been taking as much time as I thought. Again,
that's awesome.
Because you communicate with your team, you've got previous documentation to work on, and then we get to the point where we need a solution. We need to write the software ourselves. We need to outsource it. Now we've got our documentation, and what comes out of that is this process takes the longest. All right, that's a priority. Go fix that first. Yeah,
right. And like you said, it works in IT and it works in security, because once you understand the process, you're going to understand where the risks are.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's where the security team comes in, and it adds value. Now you can actually, articulate to the business, I understand this process. Here's how it goes. And here's the risks that I've found within this process that we can eliminate, that we can transfer the risk, right? We can do something about it because now we know about it.
We mentioned Jocko earlier, and of course, accountability is a huge theme in Jocko's book, Extreme Ownership. And I thought this quote from CEO, how to actually encourage employee accountability. Which CEO was it? Now that I didn't actually put it in there. But they said that they asked questions of their employees. And Jason, this is something that I know you embody wholeheartedly, and I thought it was summarized great. If you want to be an effective leader and really get to know your team and be effective, you got to make sure you're asking these questions. And one is, how do you feel things went, or how do you feel things are going? I know it's not about, I like to say it's not about feelings. At the end of the day, business really isn't, right? When it comes down to a lot of different aspects. However, when you're looking for efficiencies, having a happy, healthy team, how do you feel? It's not about what, we do a lot of things we can measure in terms of performance and accountability, but ultimately it comes down to, like, how do you feel things went? How do you feel things are going with this project? And you're going to get much more in tune with your team. And the other one that all the time, I'm in a much better habit of asking this one than the prior one, but what do you need from me? What can I do to make it better? Those are, if you're going to focus in on two things, if you're a new leader,
critical,
right? Those are the two that I would pick.
Absolutely critical. So here's the thing. I mean, there's the non-human element of business and there's the human element of business, right?
Yep.
And the human element of business is making sure, number one, you have the right people on the bus, obviously, right? We talk about this all the time. Make sure you have the right person in the right role, doing the right thing, right? But at the end of the day, perception's reality, right? And if someone's feeling a certain way, that's what they're going to project. That's how they're going to operate during the day. They have this perception. If that perception isn't real, it's your job as a leader to correct that, right? So without asking how people feel about certain things, you'll never get that level of intelligence to know that they may be misunderstanding a directive.
Yes.
They may be misunderstanding a strategy.
But Jason, what you're saying,
maybe you didn't properly communicate it, right?
What you're saying is so prolific, because to fix that problem, you could say, well, maybe that person shouldn't be on the bus, or maybe they're in the wrong seat. But what you're saying is, yes, they should be on the bus. Yes, they're in the right seat, but we can this is a fixable thing. And it's totally valid.
That's it. Or hey, wait a minute. Even take it back a level, Paul. Maybe they belong on the bus, but the only way to figure out they're in the wrong seat and could do a better job in a different seat is to know how they're feeling about things, to know how they're operating on a daily basis, right? Because you know that they're an exceptional employee. They work extremely hard, but something's just not right.
Right. Maybe someone else is in the wrong.
There's only one way to know.
Also, maybe someone else is in the wrong seat on the bus, or maybe someone else shouldn't be on the bus or should be on the bus, right? Those are all really good process and people improvements to your business to realize it that way. Wow, I learned something today.
And you want to know what? Our job as leaders, and I say this all the time to my teams, my job as a leader at this point is to get roadblocks away from my team.
Yes. Yep.
How can I be a good quarterback? How can I get roadblocks away? How can I call a good play? What do I need to be doing for the next play? Let's talk about this. What do you put it into football, right?
Well, let's not talk about football.
Yeah, I mean, but talking to your offensive line about what's going on can help you call better plays.
Agreed. Awesome stuff. Jason, thank you so much for coming on Business Security Weekly with me this week.
Thank you, Paul, and I'm looking forward to being back in the studio, man. You have no idea.
Matt, we missed you, but that will conclude this edition of Business Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. See you next time.